Hey, good morning, everybody. We're looking at today user groups primarily. What's their use within the administration console, and we're just going to look at some of the functionality that they possess, some of the functionality that you can use. Okay, so quick introduction for those of you who haven't attended before and may not have met me before. My own name is Niall, and I look after the internal training and development for Mozy support. The webinar we're going to do today, as I mentioned, the topic is user groups, but normally what we'll do in these sessions is I will do a quick description of some of the terms that we would use around the user groups and the administration console in the slide deck. And then what I'll do is I'll transition over to walking through some of the stuff we've talked about and showing you the areas where they exist. And then I will open up the session to any questions that you may have on today's topic. And I'll also solicit any feedback from you if you have any feedback for me in terms of the presentation or in terms of topics that you would like to see, or just in terms of my own presentation. If there's anything you feel that I've explained too fast, or if I have maybe spoken too quickly, please do provide that feedback too. It's all useful, and I would very much appreciate it. So we're going to look at today, what is a user group, why would you use one, and then some of the configuration and the configurable options that you may have with the administration within the administration console for user groups. So first things first, what is a user group and why would you use one? So a user group is a set of users that are grouped together for a specific reason. Okay, so that is what a user group is. It's putting together a group of people who have a similar reason to be together, and you're putting them all together in a set. Within the administration console, why would we use these? Okay, so for good examples in terms of organizations, it could be down to the organizational structure. So you may have a very set in stone structure in the organization. You may have a finance department, a finance department, a support department, a sales department, marketing department, or so forth. And each users within those specific business unit groups may have specific backup needs. And so you may use user groups within the Mozy administration console to set up those specific user groups so that you can have the users that are in marketing or the people that are working in marketing all in one user group because they'll be backing up the same stuff. And you can set up a configuration within the administration console that highlights and outlines what they can and can't back up. So it can be useful for something like that in terms of splitting up the organization as it is already. It could be down to similar backup needs. So specific people in the organization may be working with specific file types and certain things like that that you may want to be backed up by them but not by others. Again, using somebody like marketing or somebody like in my field in training and development, you may want to give them access to be able to use and back up video files and audio files and stuff like that. Whereas John in the finance department or Mary in the sales department, you may not necessarily want them to be backing up audio, music files, or video files because they don't need them for their job. So if it's similar, you can also divide the organization in just a similar backup needs like that. So user groups are useful in that sense because you're putting groupings of people together and backing up the similar content that they want and they need. If you're a reseller, okay, so if you're one of our resellers, then it's ideal because you can assign each company that you're bringing in to use the software. You can set them up as an individual user group. That way you can manage how many users they have, how much storage and resources they're using, and you can see that very straightforward. Okay, you have a very quick view, and you can also ensure that the storage and the resources that you're getting for that user group is assigned to that user group, and they can use it when they need it. So from a reseller point of view, it can be very useful in that sense because you can put in each individual organization. And then from an individual's company's point of view, so for your MozyPro customers, for your own company, it may be that you're using user groups to divide up according to the business structure or according to backup needs that the business has. Maybe if you're a smaller business and you don't necessarily have organizational groups, but you have certain people doing certain jobs within your business, if you're a small to medium-sized business, there may be individuals within that your small to medium-sized business that have different backup needs, and you can use the user groups to set up configurations to manage that. The configurable options that you may see, okay, so the option to actually add additional user groups. So if you're looking at your administration console right now, and on the left hand side you don't see the ability to add new user groups, then it's very possible that you don't have that ability on your account. If you're a larger scale MozyPro customer, or you're a reseller customer, or an enterprise customer, you may have that ability, and that's fine. That allows you to add additional user groups for the different parts of the organization. If you do have a MozyPro account and you don't have the ability to add user groups, you still have your default user group. So your main user group, you still have that there, and you can create client configurations for that default user group for both server users and desktop users. With the user groups then, in terms of moving into resources, okay, then with the resources, we have 3 different types of user groups you can set up. Okay, so you have the shared, limited, and assigned. Okay, the shared users pull the resources that are available within the organization. So within your resource pot, if you buy 100 gigabytes, then what becomes with the shared user is that they're able to pull that 100 gigabytes. All the users within that user group can pull as much resources as they need, because all the data is shared in the organization. If you create a limited user group, what you're doing there is you're putting a cap on that user group. So if you say, for example, you have the 100 gigabytes in your resources, and you limit your user group to 50 gigabytes, then that user group cannot pull any more than 50 gigabytes, even if it's available at the organizational level within the main resources. It just puts a limit on a particular user group if you so wish. The assigned feature then is taking that another step further. So the assigned, what you're doing there is you're actually taking the resources specifically out of the organization and you're giving it to this particular user group. So if you had the 100 gigabytes at the shared level in the resources, and you assigned 50 gigabytes, then that 50 gigabytes that you assigned to the user group can only be used by that user group and that user group alone. So if there's another user in the organization and you still have in that user group, you still have about 20 gigabytes free that's not being currently used, if it's assigned to that user group, no other user group can actually take and use that resource, even though it's free and it's not being used. So the assign feature, we'll show you more detail when we're going through the walkthrough, is one that you have to be aware of, and that if you are using it, that it does restrict you quite a bit in terms of the shared storage scenario. Okay. The other advantage of client configuration, or for user groups, is the ability to create client configurations. Okay, so for each individual user group, you can create up to 2 user groups. Okay, so you can create up to 2 client configurations. So what you can do is you can create a client configuration for the desktop users, and you can create a client configuration for the server users. Okay, and with the client configuration, that just allows you to point out how many users you are, or what types of files and folders you want the user to back up. You can decide when they back up. You can go into very much a lot of detail in terms of what you want to do with that client configuration. And if you want to know more about our client configurations and how to actually use them and set them up, we did a very good webinar about in July that you'll find on our community that goes through some options with client configurations and how to set them up and how to assign them to user groups. And you can also find some good documentation on our knowledge base at support.mozy.com. The other advantage of using user groups as well is that you can actually create reporting specific for just that user group. So when you're going in to create some of your reporting within the administration console, down the left hand side, when you go to report builder, in the actual target, you can assign it to your specific user group. So if you only have 20 users on a specific user group and you want to assign that to maybe one of your sub-administrators who's looking after that user group, you can do that. You can only create the report for that specific user group, and it can be sent to a specific person who's maybe managing that specific user group. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to look at some of the stuff within the administration console. I'm just going to pull across here my admin console. So this is my training partner. So this is my pro account. Okay, so what we're seeing here up on the top left hand side is some quick links. Okay, what you're seeing here is the resource summary, the user group list, the ability to add users, and so forth. The one that I want to click on here is the user group list. Okay, I click on that, it opens up my user groups. I get a listing of all the user groups that I have to date here. I can see the name of the user group, if I have sync enabled on them, if I have them enabled to use server users, the type of storage that I'm using. Okay, so if I limit it, as you can see here, I've limited this user group to 100 gigabytes. I've assigned 25 gigabytes to this user group. And then this is how much space I've actually used to date within that user group. Then how many devices am I using within that user group? Okay, so I can see that from here. I can add user groups as well if I want to. And then up here, I see the resource summary for the account. Some of you may see, if you are in an enterprise account, you may see a resource summary here, and you may see an additional pie chart on the right here, and that will show you the desktop and server users on the account. Okay, so you're seeing here the used storage space is 165 gigabytes and the available is 84 gigabytes. Okay, as I mentioned a while ago, we have three types of storage. Okay, we have the shared, the limited, and the assigned. The shared and the limited pulled from this storage pool here, and basically the shared user here will pull from this available 84 gigabytes. The limited user, if the user group hasn't hit the 100 gigabytes, will also pull from the shared amount of storage. Now, if in the scenario this storage is no longer available and the whole lot is used up, then it won't matter if this limited user group is only at 50 gigabytes because there's no more storage available for it to pull from the pool, the overall resources for the organization. So in that instance, it's because it's all a pool and shared resource, all you're doing here is basically putting a cap on this user group. It's not saying that the 100 gigabytes is going to always be available to that user group. It's just saying that you're limiting them from going over that amount. Okay, whereas with the assigned, it will actually pull that directly out of the actual resources. So if we just edit this one here, we'll see it's at 25. Let's up that to 45 and hit save. This will refresh and you'll notice that the resource summary up here is refreshed also, and the available space has gone down by 20 gigabytes. That means I've actually taken the 20 gigabytes out and I've assigned it specifically to this user group, and it can no longer be used by any other user group. Okay, it is now assigned specifically to that user group. So bear in mind that if you are using this, it requires a bit more management from your end. It just means that if this person, for example, hits their capacity on the user group, you're having to come back in here and assign more data to them. Whereas if I have a shared user group, I'm pulling from the resources, and if I hit the maximum, if I hit the limit, and there's no more storage available, I only need to add resources to the account, and then every other user group that's there that's on a shared basis will be able to pull the storage. So the shared pool allows for a lot less, I suppose, management from the level that, a very granular level of management, whereas the assigned will increase that bit, that little bit to you. But again, if you do need to have a specific amount of storage, let's say, for example, you're a reseller, and a customer has paid for 100 gigabytes, then you need to make sure that they have 100 gigabytes available to them. So you may use the assign feature then in that instance. Okay. As I say, you can add a new group here. You can edit an existing group. If you edit it, the options that you'll get here is to change the storage type. It'll give you a little information there as well. If you hover over that, it'll explain them to you there as well. You can change the name of it, limit it. If you want to enable sync and server support, you'll tick these options here. That just allows you to back up server operating systems if you have the add-on added to your account, and then as well as that, enabling sync. And that just means any user added to this user group will also be able to use the synchronization software Mozy Sync. Okay. If you want to find out information about the users within the user group, you click on the group name. It'll open up down here. In that, then you will get the information around the available keys in the organization, the available quota that this user group is able to pull. If you wanted a default storage limit for new users, you can apply that. And if you remember a moment ago, we talked about limiting the user group. You can also limit the users. So for example, if you want to add users to this user group and you want to put in a default storage limit, and that just means that you're putting a cap in on the individual users that are added to the account. So for example, you could maybe put in 10 gigabytes. That means that any user that's assigned to the account automatically gets a limit on their account of 10 gigabytes. They can't go above that. Now, you can adjust that limit at any stage, or you could remove it, but it just does allow that for new users, that maybe if you, or for particular user groups, if you want to make sure that each individual user doesn't go over a certain amount, then you can limit it. Again, bear in mind that going forward, that then does bring in the aspect then for you that it's a bit more hands-on for you then to manage that. That means that if that individual user hits their maximum capacity, and they need more storage, it means you're having to come back in here to the individual user level and adjust that limit. Okay, so it does bring it back again, a bit more management from your end if you do end up having to do that. You can enable sync as well here. If you hadn't done it previously, you can change it and now enable it. You can then hit this link here will enable sync for all users, and that would be also for the users that previously you installed and didn't have sync enabled for them. Okay, if you, for example, I have the 3 users here, and if I had this at no right now, so the enable sync option set at no, and I change it to yes, what that will do is it will enable it and make it available for new users signing up. It won't assign the ability to existing users. So what I need to do there is hit this link, and that will force it, that will make the availability as well to your existing users in this user group. Okay. So you see here the users that are in the actual user group. You'll see their user email address or their names, if they have sync, the machines, how many machines that they're backing up, if they have a storage limit assigned, how much storage they're using, when they were created, and when was the last backup. You can see the administrators, who's the admin on this user group. That's another advantage of user groups. If you're in a particularly large organization and you're the root administrator, but you can't manage absolutely everybody within the organization. Let's say you have 500 people in your organization and you'd only be managing all of those. If you have specific user groups, you can set up sub-administrators that can actually manage particular user groups. That way, let's say, for example, if we go back to our organizational structure again, I have Mary in sales and she's the sales manager. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set her up as the administrator, the sub-administrator, and I'm going to assign her to the sales user group. And then what's going to happen is if anybody needs additional storage there, Mary's going to sort it out and I don't have to do it. Then if there's from the organization level, if more storage is needed and Mary can't get it, Mary can just contact me and I can add it to the organization, and Mary looks after then the individual users within her user group. So sub-administrators can be used. You can see who is the sub-administrators assigned to the user group from here. And then as well as that, you can check the client configurations. So always be sure that if you are, and we highlight this in the webinar on client configurations, that if you are creating a client configuration, make sure you assign it. Okay, as you can see here at the moment, there's none actually assigned to this user group, but I can do a drop down and I can see the ones that are available to me. Okay, and bear in mind there's a desktop version and there's a server version. Okay, so that if you have desktop users and server users within your user group, you don't necessarily need to have them both backing up the same stuff. You can let a desktop user back up certain aspects, but the server user then back up more by creating separate client configurations. And all that will happen there is that when they are installed and they're flagged as a server user or a desktop user, then they will use the official and the relevant client configuration to their actual user profile. Okay. So that's just some of the features you can see from within here, making sure client configurations, checking out the information on the actual default or for the actual user group. If you need to edit the type of storage or anything like that, it's the little pencil here on the right hand side. Okay, so that's where you go to edit the name, the type of storage that's being used, or if you have a limit to adjust that. And also the same if you have an assigned user. Okay. Finally, in terms of the reporting, okay, so if you go and create a report here, okay, you'll see some of the default reports that we have here. And let's say, for example, I want to create a machine watch list report. And the machine watch list here calls out problems with backups on each device, signaling issues and potential issues that need attention. Okay, so that's what that does. It provides the state of the backup service by device, including the time of the most recent backup and the amount of quota consumed. Okay, so what you do there then is you just create your report name. So we'll just say webinar. Okay. When I want it to run, daily, weekly, monthly, let's say I want to run it weekly. When do I want it to start? I want it to start today, or I can start next week. I can start on the 31st. Make sure it's active. And then what I want to select here, because it's a machine watch list to see if there's any issues, if a backup is due after how many days. So if I want to be very, very tight on it, I could set that to 1. Okay. If I was running it daily, maybe I wanted to run a bit, maybe I want to be making sure that the backup is overdue a bit longer than that. So if I'm running it weekly, then maybe I want to check and say, okay, well, if a backup hasn't run in over 2 or 3 days, then maybe, that could be sufficient. But you can adjust that and what works best for you. Definitely with daily, you probably want to go, if a backup hasn't happened maybe in 3-4 days, then you want to be notified about it. Anything less than that, there's the chance that you're going to be notified because somebody, let's say John in the finance team is on a day off or a vacation day or a personal day off, or he's taking a Friday off and he has Saturday and Sunday off too, and he's not back to the office until Monday. Then if you have set that to 2 days, then you're going to get a notification to say, okay, well, John hasn't backed up. But there's a reason why John hasn't backed up, because his computer wasn't turned on. So that's why when you click on this first, it's set to 7 days at default. Okay. The report scope is where the user groups come into play. Okay. So now you can set, okay, well, I'm looking after, okay, so we use Mary again in the sales team. Okay, Mary's looking after a particular user group. So I want this report just for Mary's team so that she's only getting the report on her team. We select her user group. Okay, then we hit the email options. We put in Mary's email address, mary@webinar.com. Okay, and then we put in a subject line and we say your sales group machine watch list. Okay, and if you want to put in a specific message for that as well, you can do that. And then you hit save. And what that will do is then it will run that, okay, but it will run that report only for that specific user group. So again, it does allow a bit more of granularity for specific user groups, especially if you have if you're dealing with a larger organization where you have multiple user groups. Okay, so that's all I wanted to show you today in terms of the user groups. I will leave the time open now to any questions that you may have in relation to today's session. If you don't have any questions and you need to jump off, thank you very much for your time. I very much appreciate you taking the time to join us today, and we hope to see you next month.